Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Yacht Crew Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I am your host, and I'm very pleased to welcome my next guest. We are going to be chatting today about mental health and the dangers of false marketing. So I've invited a panel of experts. Danielle, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, Ria, and thank you for having me. I'm Danielle Aiken. I am a registered counsellor and clinical therapist, and my background is nursing and midwifery. So I've been in the health industry for quite a long time, and I run my own private practice in rural Victoria for psychotherapy and counselling practice.
Thank you for joining us today. Corinne, not that you need any introduction, but Corinne, introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name's Corinne Reason. I'm the owner of the Crew Coach, and I provide an array of services for yacht crew, specifically around mental health and leadership. And I'm also, and I think the operative word there is what Danielle mentioned, registered counsellor. And yeah, I think that's really important, especially what we're going to be discussing today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we have Kate. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, good morning, ladies. From the middle of the Atlantic. I am a stewardess. I'm currently in the industry, and my background is clinical social work and design. So I have an eclectic background, but I've been in the industry for about 3 years, and I'm just very interested in getting involved with the topic we're about to discuss today.
Thank you for joining us. Now, the reason that I wanted to do this is because as of late, and I was saying off camera that 4 years ago, when I first started Yachting International Radio, mental health was something that came up within yachting every once in a while when there was a suicide, and it stuck around for maybe a month and then it would disappear until the next suicide. That's changed over the last 4 years. Now it is something that people are much more open about. It's being discussed. And I think partially because it has become an issue that the world is looking at quite closely as well. What has happened is we are now seeing an entire industry springing up of mental health for profit. And there's dangers within that because a life coach isn't a mental health professional. We do have those mental health first aid, but that is somebody who is, it's like an ambulance attendant. When you're talking about healthcare, it is somebody who, there's a report that somebody has been injured. The ambulance goes and picks them up, takes care of them on the way to where they need to go. And again, it's a stepping stone into the right direction. But my fear is that we have a lot of people that aren't qualified, that are selling services that they are not qualified to sell. And it is a life or death situation. Danielle, can you address that?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with what you're saying. And I think in the health industry, particularly with mental health, it's essential to seek the right care. As you mentioned, suicide is a major threat, not just in the yachting industry, but globally. And I think having people who have some degree of awareness of that, because I always encourage my clients or anybody to actually speak out about their mental health issues rather than keep it for themselves. But that doesn't mean that those people that they're speaking to are the end goal. That's the beginning. So for people to be talking is wonderful, but for people to seek out the right help is essential. And it is a matter of life and death sometimes. If people are struggling, particularly with really serious mental health issues, it is essential to seek qualified, recognised, trained professional help.
Corinne, what are your thoughts on this? You know, the yachting industry inside and out. Have you noticed a change, and have you noticed that people are popping up here and there and offering mental health services?
I certainly have. And my fascination, and maybe Danielle can give us some insight here, is being a mental health coach and advertising as a mental health coach. And from my understanding, it can take between 6 weeks to 6 months to become a coach. With working specifically with mental health issues, I have no idea how a mental health coach actually addresses those serious concerns or mental health challenges with the knowledge that they have. Because a lot of it can stem where you do need to use psychotherapy and other tools to help support that person. But there's a huge difference between counseling and coaching. And yes, you can get into some serious, dangerous territories if you start unpacking that without the right qualification. That's my fear and my worry.
Hey, being crew and current crew, what is the feeling of crew on board throughout the maritime industry?
I had a really great chat with some of my crew members yesterday. I was making some notes, and Kareen's just hit the nail on the head. Just talking about this is a very happy boat. This is a boat where a crew member last year lost their mum, and they all just rallied behind her and caught her in the most beautiful safety net of support and love. But this is quite rare. This is a boat where people have extraordinary longevity. They all know each other extremely well. There's a playful banter that has gone on for, it feels like, years. And it shows you what boats should be like. Obviously, it's not 100% perfect. Nowhere is. This was almost so good that I got to experience this sort of environment because it's been completely different for me in other ways. Yeah, I'm incredibly concerned about just the lack of education around and the kind of dismissal of our education around psychological issues and mental health issues that we trained and we studied so hard to understand certain facets and try and understand theoretical and implementing it into real life. It laughs at the face of that if you think anyone can just do a 6-month course and then be able to counsel somebody through a lifelong process. I am incredibly concerned about what's happening on boats. And yeah, I think that we're in danger of seeing a lot more suicidal ideation, a lot more depression, a lot more anxiety, and a lack of places that people can go for support. Kareen is only one person and everybody knows about her, but she only has 2 hands and 1 mouth, and it's not enough. But who else do you go to if you're stuck in an industry that then is only on the second one offering better help, the international kind of movement now towards better help? You don't have an understanding about what yachties go through, and our lives are very different to ordinary lives. And then people who've just done a 6-month, 12-month, in some cases 6 weeks coaching course. We take an oath of, and I know all these ladies here have taken an oath to do care. We know the only moments we're allowed to break confidentiality. You know, it's a piss take. If I can use colloquial language, it's a piss take of the hard work and slog and papers we had to write to get to where we are. And it's a very dangerous situation to get into. You can be held legally liable for giving people wrong advice. I think it's dangerous territory.
Do you think crew are aware of the sort of different things they need to look for, or do they just see mental health and jump on it?
Such a good question, because I'm not 100% sure if we're talking about babies as well. And I'm not in no means trying to insult young people coming into the industry, but this is a predominantly young industry of young people wanting to make friends, travel, make money, and figure out for a large majority what the next step is. And I think it's a fantastic tool to do gap years and have some time off to find yourself away from family. But yeah, I think the word mental health still comes with a taboo. I think people still find it very difficult to talk about depression or anxiety. In this new woke generation, they're very happy to talk about how they feel, but there's also an openness that can be quite dangerous at times as well. Very openly sexually, very openly about substance abuse. I think that they are ill prepared. And because this industry is the way it is. We promote younger and younger people into more and more leadership roles where they really are not trained. And it's not even you have to be trained to be in leadership roles in this industry, but you have to have some life experience. And this is what they're lacking as well. So you're coming at from all sides with people who just really probably need a shoulder to cry on, and that's not even really available.
Danielle, what exactly are the certifications? Say if somebody, 19, 20 years old, and they finally reach that situation where they're thinking, I do recognize that I've got a mental illness and I do need to reach out and get some professional help. What credentials should they be looking for, and what kind of questions should they ask?
There's several questions that most responsible, or several conditions that most responsible counselors, psychotherapists, or psychologists would have to have in order to practice in industry. And that is generally that they have their legitimate credential, that they have got through a legitimate training organisation, often an RTO, recognised training organisation. They should have insurance. They generally, I wouldn't go to anybody who didn't belong to a professional association. And in belonging to a professional association, you're held accountable. So you're held accountable so that you have ongoing professional development, insurance, police checks, child protection audit checks, indemnity and public liability insurance. We're working in an area where we're talking and being subjected to people who have enormous traumas, some pros. So in their capacity as a therapist, to be adequately protecting yourself as well from trauma, supervision is something that is a requirement in most professional organisations. So I'd be looking to see, do you belong to a professional association? And if they do, then you can be pretty well assured that they cover most of the bases, educationally and all the checks as well that are required. Because we're talking, as Kate mentioned, there are so many ethical considerations, and people can do courses, any kind of courses available. And I know I'm actually the Australian president of the Australian Therapist Association as well, so I know all about governance and requirements of therapists. And in our industry as well as counselling, but in the therapy industry, we often see people who do a 3-day course who put themselves up. Wherever their country of their home origin is, they should have some qualification or some ability to be connected to a professional associate.
Corinne, being in yachting, you are aware that it does have quite the reputation for substance abuse and alcohol abuse. That is something that can just be the fact that people are letting off steam at the end of a long charter, etc. In your professional opinion, when does that line be crossed? Because as we know, with mental illness, people tend to self-medicate. Is there a way that you can recognize somebody just getting off their face every couple of weeks, or somebody who is actually self-medicating because there's a deeper issue?
I think it's in relation to the consistency. So how much are they drinking? How regularly are they drinking or engaging in alcohol and drugs? And this is where mental health awareness, first aid courses are so useful, because you're going to be more in tune to look out for the warning signs. However, it doesn't qualify you to counsel a person, but you can certainly pick up the signs and then signpost to a professional. But I was speaking to Kate the other day, and she said it's rife in our industry with alcohol and drugs, cocaine, very popular drug to use, weed. And obviously, not only does it affect our mental health, but it's become a safety issue on board. I've heard of captains being intoxicated and driving a vessel. So it's absolutely horrific in terms of the things that can go wrong. I've had clients tell me that they've lost friends in the industry because they're intoxicated and they've choked on their own vomit and have passed. So yeah, I think we do have a crisis on our hands, and we do need more support. We do have a service such as IS1 or Yacht Crew Health. But as Kate mentioned, it's working with professionals that understand the industry because it's so unique. And Crew, with any therapeutic relationship, you want to feel heard and understood. And when you don't, it's extremely frustrating. And Ria, I know that you're the host of the show, but I've got a burning question. In terms of the dangers, not only for, let's say, a life coach or mental health coach, but also for the person who's seeking help through that service provider, from both ends, what are the proposed risks, Danielle?
Risks, I think risks will fall, as you say, in both areas. If someone sets themselves up as a professional when they really are not, then they're at risk of being sued, they're at risk of acting unprofessionally, which is also going to lead to having some sort of legal issue brought to them. Because when people are trained properly, we are taught ethical considerations, we are taught about confidentiality, we are taught about boundaries and what's appropriate in a session and what's not appropriate, physical touch and conduct, that sort of thing. So in order to protect yourself as a therapist, I would want to be very well versed in those things, and I think a lot of these short courses are not. So that's from a therapist's point of view. From the client point of view, it's just a minefield because they're probably not going to get the care that they require, and it could end up in them taking their own life, the worst scenario. And I think that even if people are properly qualified, it doesn't mean that they're going to be able to do everything and be comfortable doing everything either. So there are lots of very well qualified therapists, counselors that choose not to work with suicide if they will refer. So knowing from the therapist's perspective again when to refer, when you're not comfortable, when there's episode of transference, perhaps somebody in your family has taken their life and you're not the person that you're dealing with the way you haven't.
Kate, I was going to ask you, do you think Crew are aware of the dangers that over excess can lead to? There are many amazing advocates within the industry around mental health now, amazing advocates. But do you think the fact that addiction is not something that is talked about, because you never hear about addiction. You never hear about that aspect of the mental health sort of spectrum. Do you think Crew coming in are aware of the dangers?
No, I generally don't think that they do. I think that it's quite interesting because the different ages are obviously aware of different things. So the older generation, obviously, I'm part of that generation, have a much clearer understanding and have slowly being introduced to talking more and more about mental health issues. We're more aware because we've maybe had more life experience and we've seen it happen to those around us. Whereas the only image I've got in my head is watching a whole bunch of people from below deck, which everybody thinks that our world is like below deck, but you get this image of all these young crew members after a long charter getting off, wobbling down cobble streets in Europe, getting absolutely hammered. And there's something very attractive and cool about it because they're all beautiful, but you don't see behind the scenes of what's happening. They've been working nonstop for a large amount of time. Their tolerance is lower. They don't realize the things that their bodies are being put through. And so you get drunk quicker. I'm trying to mitigate it, look at it from all different angles. But I don't think that they can see what they're doing to themselves. And I think that they follow the cool people around them. They want to be in the industry. I spend a lot of time in crew houses with young people, helping them with their CVs and getting into the industry. And I see it all the time. They're all stoned pretty much from the moment they get home from day work, or if they're not day working, from early afternoon. Edibles, I don't even think it's legal in Florida, but they sell edibles, which is just like getting stoned anyway, and a lot of drinking. And in a lot of cases, a lot of cocaine as well. And I don't think that they know the ramifications. I don't think that they have access to the same amount of information that we all do online. It's difficult, Rhea, because I think that, it differs for different age groups. But my thing is that who do you talk to? where do you go? And the people that they are being optioned with going to. Daniela was saying about transference. These are the minutiae of things that we study when we study clinical work. That's a concept that takes so long. It took me forever to try and grasp. But the person who is selling themselves as a cure for people with mental health issues isn't taking into consideration what they're doing to themselves. It's osmosis. Through osmosis, they become a sounding block for so much trauma around them. And where are they getting that out to? There's so many different levels. I don't know if any of that makes sense.
We need to make sure, and as much as we have banged on about mental health in the industry over the past 4 years, perhaps it's now time to start banging on about being accredited mental health. Because even the higher echelons of the industry were the ones that were recommending these life coaches. There's something wrong with that.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
What's missing definitely is education on so many levels, not just on social levels, but on a physiological level, and what happens with addiction, what happens in the brain. One of the problems with addiction, and if we're talking about mental health, is that, and this is perhaps things that these people who don't do accredited courses don't know, but one of the things that happens is the brain is actually changed with addiction, and serotonin receptors are altered, and people actually need more of the drug to get their high. And because if they don't have access to that while they're at sea, it predisposes to depression because their brain is off and they can't get the natural high out of life anymore. So they're more of the drug. And that's a problem.
Corinne, in the industry, I have seen a lot of stories online where people that actually have been diagnosed with mental health issues have gone and sought treatment and legitimately need to take some form of antidepressant. Some of them get kicked off boats. That makes it even harder for people to say, look, I have a mental health issue. I am addressing it properly. I am taking the medication that I am needing in order to just function. But if I tell anybody about it, I'm not going to get the job. And if I don't tell anybody about it, but somebody finds my pills, then I will get kicked off the boat. Is that a problem?
Huge problem. Huge. And with most of my clients as well. And then you're fighting between your moral, ethical mind, but then also trying to protect your future, your career. And what's so fascinating, if you look at the definition from the World Health Organization about mental health, it's about making an active contribution. It is about being productive, and then that's taken away from you. In terms of depression and anxiety, those are the common mental health issues that we see within our industry, but it does range on a spectrum from low to severe. What we need to do, it goes back to what we're talking about here collectively, is education. My sense is that heads of departments or captains do not understand mental health issues. So it's easier for them to fire people and let them go because they're fearful of what could happen. So yeah, you're right. It's a massive problem. But I believe, just to sum that up, it comes down to education and not understanding mental health issues, not understanding how to deal with them, because you can still have a mental health issue and function. And it ranges on a scale.
I would liken it to, I'll say, blood pressure. A lot of the captains within the industry that are on board right now, okay, so they skew older men. Fact. But I can guarantee you, some of those captains are at an age where I'm pretty sure some of them are taking blood pressure pills because, that happens. Nobody is going to kick them off a boat or fire them because they're taking a blood pressure medication. And if those pills are found, they're not going to be kicked off the boat because they need them in order to function. It's the same with mental health.
When I was one of the first boats that I joined, when I was filling out my medical questionnaire, it was, you ladies, it was just completely bizarre. There was one sentence and it was a tick the box, yes or no. Have you ever suffered from anxiety, depression, psychosis, drug addiction, been in any sort of therapy, and all these things were boxed into one sentence. And I thought to myself, my God, if I tick yes, don't you want to know which one I've had? They are so vastly different from one another that, the difference between psychosis, substance abuse, and anxiety, and this was coming out of a time of a global pandemic. I would be more concerned if somebody didn't tick that box, because everybody's been through anxiety. But how then do you say a generalized anxiety disorder, and then you have people who suffer from chronic anxiety? I'm a person who suffers from chronic anxiety. For me, the way that I describe it is it feels like I've drunken 50 cups of coffee if I'm not medicated. If I am on a low-dose SSRI, a select serotonin reuptake inhibitor, I'm absolutely fine. I don't have that wobbly feeling because there doesn't have to be anything in my life that's making me anxious necessarily to suffer from anxiety. I have chronic anxiety. Yes, there are people who suffer from acute anxiety brought on by work stress, etc. And this drives me nuts in this industry that we talk about you don't want to be medicated, because there's a difference between an SSRI and a benzo. A benzodiazepine does severely impair your ability to do work. And that should be put in a medical aid kit that is to deal with a kind of acute cases of crisis for somebody. Other than that, a select serotonin reuptake inhibitor is not an addictive drug. It's something that you have to remind yourself to take every day. And all that it does is that it's an inhibitor. So it keeps the serotonin that is being developed in your body from being reuptaken, if that's even a word. It just holds it into the synapse, which allows your brain to have those hits of serotonin that it needs to cope. But what do you do when you go into your ENG1 and you want to be somebody who is 100% open? You've been told, be honest, be open. And then you share that you've got anxiety and they only give you 6 months on your ENG because they need you to go and have some sort of extra check done. It's ridiculous.
In an industry where you can get on board and you can be a convicted rapist because nobody does criminal background checks, you could be a murderer, you can be a pedophile, or you can also get on board and you can be high as a kite on cocaine or drunk as a skunk. That's okay. But a legitimate mental health issue that you are actually looking after and being monitored by a doctor, because none of these drugs are given out willy-nilly. You're not going to a street corner to buy an SRI inhibitor. It's something that is monitored. And so that is treated far more seriously than somebody who went out last night, raped a girl, got on board, and is still drunk and high on cocaine.
Yeah.
Something has to change. Something has to change. And I guess just having that conversation and making sure that we're blunt and honest, because I really think that now we've tried to tiptoe. We've tried to say it nicely and nobody listens.
Where do you go? I went to a mental health workshop about a month ago, and it was put together by somebody who has the best intentions. But I think that is it the best intentions, or is it salacious that people just want to know people's inner stories? And where do we go from here? You can't necessarily talk to your parents and your family. For a lot of yachties, it's unavailable. They do not understand what we go through. Normal practitioners who have never been in yachting also will struggle to understand the confounds of tiny spaces that we live on top of each other, the access to various things we have, the spoilt behavior of entitlement, and they only use the top raises and the thing because everything is given to us. We're very lucky people to be working in this industry, but it is open to abuse. And I just don't know where people go. Where does a qualified professional like myself, and Corinne is a dear friend of mine and has been from the beginning of my journey in the industry, where do I go if I need help? Because I did reach out to my captain. And although I got to tell my story to that person about what happened to me, they disappeared. And then my story was used they asked permission to use my story to promote mental health awareness and what is going on in the industry, and then disclosed to a publication in the industry that I was one of the people, the stories that they shared. I was like, now do I need to tell that person which one of the terrible stories that were told were mine? It's just, even with the best intentioned people, they're walking into an area of landmines. I don't have somebody that I can talk to, because I am not going to go and speak to one of these life coaches, because I have more experience than they do and I could walk rings around them. And I also don't want to bother Corrine in many ways, because she is so inundated. Where do you go? Who do I talk to?
Corrine, you are part of a working group that is trying to address this issue straight across all of maritime. Is that something that you see is going to be changed in the near future?
It is being addressed, because I'm also part of the COPE working group. But we're just brainstorming in terms of, again, providing education. But what Kate's referring to, I think, is specifically counselors, professional counselors and psychologists or psychiatrists who have an understanding of the industry to be able to better support crew. And that's what I'm hearing is the need. And just thinking as we wrap this conversation up, I don't think any of us here are dismissing life coaches or mental health coaches. They serve a purpose in a certain capacity, but they've just got to be very careful in terms of the boundaries that they could potentially cross, because it can be very damaging
To their lives as well.
Yeah. And essentially, I read a report recently in Australia, was 1 in every 3 psychologists suffer from depression because of vicarious trauma. And hearing these stories, and we have got a lot of trauma stories within our industry. I've heard of hostages, I've dealt with suicides. It's awful. And you don't realize, I didn't realize the effect of their vicarious trauma until I had a supervisor who said to me in the prison, "You've got vicarious trauma, you need to take time off work." I couldn't see clients. But if you do not have the part of the professional association and have a supervisor that helps you not only from a practice point of view, but maintain professional and ethical standards, you'll end up in deep water. That could wreck your career as well, not only like ruining someone else's mental health or aggravating it and making it worse.
100%.
I agree. Ladies, I want to say thank you. And as Corrine said, it's not anything against life coaches. Life coaches, they have a purpose. Everybody within the system has a purpose. It's just that they need to make sure that they aren't, in their advertising and in their speaking, that they aren't putting themselves out there as something that they aren't. And I think that is the most important thing, is to be absolutely brutally honest about what you do, what you can offer, and how you can help, and make sure that you stick to what you do. Thank you, Danielle, for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Great conversation.
Thank you, Corrine, as always. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Rhea.
And Kate, thank you. I would love to have you on board again at some stage. I have a feeling you've got a lot more you want to say, and I'd love to have you back so you can say it all.
Too much. Yes, Rhea, I follow your work and I would love to chat more. I think that this is a conversation that we need to keep brainstorming, but we need to start coming up with solutions. We need to start trying things so that we can tick them off. We need to be getting people help at all the different levels, proper clinical help. Or those people who are coaches need to go, hang on a second, this is a can of whoop ass I can't deal with. I'm going to now recommend that they go and speak to somebody who is clinically trained.
I agree. We will continue this at another date. I have to say thank you once again. You have been watching another edition of Yacht Crew Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Rhea. I have been your host. We'll see you again next time.